Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 74 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. My name is Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and you know who's with me.
Yeah, Santoki here and Mash. It's a truce at the moment because both the Jamaica Talawas and Guyana Amazon Warriors are still alive and kicking in the CPL heading into the playoff week. So things might change in the coming days, but for now we're all friends on here. And Mash, we're joined by a very special returning guest as part of our CPL coverage.
Yes, most definitely. It's only our second ever returning guest on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and we had to get this guest on. Obviously, if you're watching on the visuals, you can already tell. If you're listening on the audio, I will do the big intro. But we're in the height of CPL season. We're in the Guyana leg of the tournament. I'm sure our guest is super excited because the crowds in Guyana have been off the chain. Santoki, that crowd may well yet take Guyana to their first ever CPL title. But without any further ado, I'm delighted to welcome back to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast the CEO of the Caribbean Premier League, Mr. Pete Russell. Pete, how you doing?
Great, lads. Thank you for having me on again. It's good to be back.
Most definitely, Pete. And listen, we're gonna get right into it because I think the first time we spoke to you was 2020. So the COVID season. And I guess let's start with just reflecting on those last 3 years and what it's meant to kind of you as the CEO to finally get CPL back in front of crowds in more than one place. And certainly, with no disrespect to St. Lucia and St. Kitts, who've also added to the tournament, but certainly in Trinidad and Guyana, you've had probably what I'd call the traditional, original feel back of what CPL is known for in terms of raucous crowds and high-octane energy. But from your perspective over that kind of last 3-year journey, I don't even know how you try and sum it up in a few words, but what's it been like?
Yeah, look, I think COVID, we know was tough for everyone. And I think for us, our position very early on actually was to make sure we got the games played. We obviously knew it was going to be difficult. As you say, no crowds, difficult getting people into the Caribbean. But we had great support from Trinidad in 2020 and then St. Kitts in 21. So, to play those 2 seasons, I think was incredibly important for the brand. I think it was, a lot of other tournaments went by the wayside. History will repeat that, IPL didn't finish and had to come back again. PSL didn't complete. So lots of issues elsewhere. And I think testament actually to the way the tournament was organized from a local perspective and obviously the work we did as well. But it was very important that those 2 seasons took place. And again, you saw the quality of cricket in those 2 events. That's the one thing that's been the mainstay is the cricket's been fantastic. And, if you wind forward to this year, you look at the league table, and yes, today was a bit disappointing that we didn't get a game between Jamaica and St. Lucia, but the tournament's been very close. Anyone can beat anyone. I know Barbados are sort of clear at the minute, but that can change in a heartbeat. And you just have to see what Guyana have done coming from last to sort of second. And then I know they've dropped down to 4th today, but they could well go on, as you rightly say, and lift the title, which would be phenomenal. But coming back to your point about crowds, that's really where that's been our lifeblood for the last few seasons and before COVID. And I think, look, we got record crowds in St. Lucia, so we were very pleased with that. St. Kitts was sort of hit a little bit by the weather. So I think it was understandable that we didn't necessarily get the maximum crowds there, but Trinidad was rocking. And I don't know whether you got to watch the game last night, but that was off the charts, as will tonight. Tonight will be another sellout. So we don't have really any tickets left to sell, which is fantastic.
Santoki, sorry.
Yeah, firstly, Peter, I must commend you for having probably the greatest Wi-Fi connection I've ever seen someone in Guyana have.
I've got two people standing outside with an antenna.
But let's talk about sort of, so in terms of the CPL structure, obviously you've gone from having, because of COVID, solo hosts to this year we've got 4 different nations hosting. Is that sort of the long-term plan, or is there a plan to go back to having 6 hosts? What is sort of your vision for the upcoming years?
Yeah, it's one that we mulled at the end. What was interesting about COVID is it teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot about how you can structure your organization probably in a more efficient way. And what we found was actually the 10 o'clock game and the 7 p.m. game worked very well. It worked very well in India. And then we obviously got our local audience here for the 7 p.m. game. And we sort of thought, well, actually, that's probably a good structure to have. So that was the reason really for coming back with 4 countries. And, you got to remember when we were putting the schedule together, COVID was still very much an active part of our life. So you didn't want to sort of overreach in any way and suddenly end up with a problem. So that was sort of the reasoning behind it. I think it's worked incredibly well. We do pick up obviously our Indian audience for a 10 a.m. game, but again, the cricket has been good. So my view is yes, we can bring the party in the evening, which is fantastic. But the 10 a.m. game, good cricket is good cricket. It doesn't matter whether it's played in front of 20,000 people or one person. So that's always the key for me, whether the intensity would still be there for those early games. And of course, these guys are seasoned professionals and they want to put on a show. So that hasn't been a problem at all. Would we go back to 6 countries? It's possible. But as you two know, you look at the cricket window or cricket calendar and you figure out, well, how do we play more games? It's not easy.
And what has it been like to have this kind of final stage in Guyana? I mean, we'll have fans from different areas of the Caribbean listening to this, but I've got to call it as I see it. The atmosphere for those Providence night games have been like, I'm assuming it's like an advertiser's dream. Like, it looks like somewhere you want to be. I think Santoki sent me a message a couple of days ago about Santoki, you'll remind me of the exact wording, but something to do with the decibel level in Providence being one of the highest in sport or something like that. So I was just intrigued. What led to the decision making? How did it all come about to move? Not even finals week. It's because it's the last stage of the tournament into finals week. How did it all come together to take it to Guyana?
I think it goes back. I mean, look, you make a very good point. I mean, both actually, Queen's Park Oval, Lara and Providence, if you take those 3 stadiums, especially when they're full or pretty much full, which we've had over the last 10 days, the decibel levels are ridiculous. I mean, it is that place you want to be. I mean, the amount of people that are watching it, Christ, I want to go and watch cricket in those stadiums because it's just so intense. And, that was really the idea. We wanted to finish the tournament with those 2 destinations so that you knew you were going to get to the business end of the tournament and the excitement was going to build around the cricket, but then we had this wonderful backdrop of huge crowds and all that entertainment that goes with it. So, you're right. I mean, I was watching the game. I mean, it's always interesting because obviously you're there live, but I love watching it on TV to see what the viewer gets to watch. And my God, you're right. You wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I mean, where else would you want to be watching cricket? It was bonkers. So, and that's really, I think, a precursor to what's going to come in the next week, because I think it's only going to build as Guyana probably go on their merry way and hopefully get to the final.
So tell me, what's going on there? There's a Guyana bias on this podcast. So just for my Talawas fans, I am still back in the Talawas all the way.
But you're right. The last 4 teams. I mean, I know, as I said, Barbados have been, I think, the standout team, but they're all good teams. I mean, anyone on their day can beat anyone. So it's going to be some intriguing cricket.
And we also had this year the inaugural women's CPL take part. So 3 franchises in that. Sort of looking at it, how did you view it as a success? How did you sort of find that?
I just thought that was brilliant because actually what was lovely was to see the women come into a franchise environment. They've never been part of that before. So even just simple things like when they picked up their team kit and their bags and felt part of a thing, a group, not just the women's but the men's, and that was the important thing that I wanted to do, was to make sure that the women played alongside the men. I didn't want to put them out separately so they felt they weren't part of something. So I definitely wanted them to be part of it, and we did little things. I mean, I don't know whether you noticed, but we kept the boundaries exactly the same for the women as we did for the men. So we tried to make it as inclusive as possible for them to feel part of what CPL is about. And I just thought the reaction when Barbados won the 60 and then Trinidad won the women's CPL, you could feel it, the way they all celebrated. It was great to watch, and the feedback's been very strong, and it's something that hopefully we can build alongside Cricket West Indies in the future.
How many years in the making was a women's CPL? I'm just intrigued. Was it like 2 years ago, or was it literally in this year run up to CPL 2022? What made the brand want to take the plunge, so to speak, in introducing the women's competition?
So we played 2 exhibition games in 2019 in Trinidad. And look, those again, they were T10s actually, but again, we looked at that, and there was a lot of enthusiasm around that. It was only 2 teams. But then, of course, you look around the world and you see what the 100 has done with its women's games. And we sort of felt the time was right. I mean, look, it's always a challenge because, bolting another tournament on, similar actually with the 60s, the commercial pressures are significant, because it's not a slam dunk that people are just going to say, oh, great, you're doing women's cricket, we'll back you and support you. So I would look at both of those 2 events as investments, as opposed to, we did it and it was a huge commercial success. I think they were hugely successful, but I think the commercial element probably follows. But yeah, it's sort of since 2019, we sort of thought, we need to do this. And I think for West Indies cricket or women's cricket in the West, I think it's vitally important that we do keep going with this, because actually it's another way of, young girls. And it's fascinating how many young girls or women who've come up to me and say, oh, I used to play cricket when I was at school, and I wish this was around, because it gives them again a sense of, okay, well, actually, if I do play that, maybe I'll go and play in the 100, and then the IPL is doing its thing. So there's opportunity for women's cricketers coming up. So we want to be part of that.
Sorry, Santel, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, and we've mentioned it a few times now. It's come up. So the 60, you've obviously, not only did you bolt the women's CPL onto the existing CPL, you bolted on a new format. The 60 got a lot of people talking for different reasons. Sort of, when you came up with the planning stages of that, what was your objective with bringing in the 60 before the CPL?
I mean, if I'm honest, it was more logistical than anything, because I had all the teams there. I had pretty much everything I needed to put another tournament on in place. So I didn't have to, if you like, reinvent the wheel and say, okay, well, we're doing a new tournament and bring all those added costs in. So I could sort of amortize the costs, if you like. But actually, the whole idea behind it was to say, look, we wanted to create a new concept, in as much as this is about 4 days of cricket, 4 or 5 days. It's a bit like, rugby sevens in that sense. You have that party that starts on a Wednesday, ends on a Sunday, but it's really quick fire, quick snack stuff. T10 for me, I've always been fascinated by the concept, because it's actually I think it's a format that suits the West Indies style even more. But if you look at the way we've done it, so 6 wickets, unlocking power play. The 6 wickets thing actually, I think, was the best thing we did, because teams took a while to figure out that actually you can go smashing it from ball 1, but then you're 5 wickets down after 5 overs, and oh, hello, what do I do now? So they adapted themselves. And actually, if you notice, by the end of that, they were playing a lot more, I wouldn't say conservatively, but making sure that they paced their innings. So I think actually, and some things we didn't quite get right. I think the fan ball may be a bit of a stretch, but again, that was quite interesting. But I think, as you said, it got people talking. I mean, it got people saying, well, what is this thing? And, we're not going to play it again before CPL. That's not the intention. The intention is to play it throughout the year at different times. So, whether we go to Grenada at Christmas or Barbados at Easter, that was the idea. It was really just to give it a launch pad.
It's interesting that you say that, actually, because you've kind of touched on some areas I wanted to to delve into, and I might leave them for Santoki, because actually the first thing I want to ask you is who. I'm really intrigued as to the marketing idea of the 60. Who are you going to give credit to it for? So all the kind of like, okay, you're going to switch over at 30 balls from one end, 30 from the other, 6 wickets and you're done, etc. I'm just intrigued as to where did the idea come from? To how do you create that brand?
So here's how it started. So there's me sitting there on a cold October day in the UK, and I have my marketing team. I've got Peter Miller, who you know, obviously, and Chris Watson. And we're sitting there and I'm going, right, look, we want to do this. I don't want to call it the T10. I don't want to call it the Caribbean T10, because that's just, that's what everyone calls them. So I said, I want a unique descriptor for it. And yes, okay, we nicked it a little bit from the 100 in terms of what they've done, but actually 60 for us was the perfect, because we could use sixes. You could do all sorts of things with it in terms of a name. But the key thing is it's our brand. The 60 is our brand. So no one else can call their tournament the 60. So that's a brand that hopefully is synonymous with what we can do in the Caribbean. And then I said, look, think of it in the terms that someone is playing a video game. So think about the fan base you're looking at, and think about what would someone playing a video game think of? They want to unlock things. They want to get rewarded for things. They want things to happen quickly, hence bowling just from one end. And so, the unlocking the power play was something, you get rewarded for doing something. And then it's about, and Miller was very adamant that, look, you have to make it from a cricketing perspective more viable, hence the 6 wickets came in. In fact, I think we started with 7 wickets, but went back to 6. But so, that was really the starting point. The starting point was to think of your audience, think of what they're used to doing and what they're used to expecting in the entertainment that they already consume. So video games. And let's build it from there. And I think it was, as you say, interestingly received. I mean, certainly day one, everyone hated it, but by the end of it, people got the hang of it. They were saying, actually, yeah, it's not too bad. And players loved it. Players absolutely loved it.
Santoki, I'll let you jump in, but I mean, I speak for Santoki myself when I say we enjoyed it. We always said from day one through to the end of the tournament, it was just. It was enjoyable, sorry, I should say. And I think if people thought too deeply beyond that, then yeah, of course, you can find anything to nitpick at. But first and foremost, I found it to just be an enjoyable format of cricket to watch. Sorry, Santoki.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with you, Mash. And just going back, sorry, to the women's CPL, it was an enjoyable tournament. A lot of fans would say it was probably a bit too short for their liking. Are there plans to sort of make it longer going forward, just allow the players to have more time to develop into it?
Definitely, and that's something you will definitely do for sure. I think, we wanted to give the women a lot of cricket, so hence why the 60 worked for us, because they played a fair few games in that as well. So, but yeah, the women's CPL will definitely extend it. Whether I will extend to more teams at the minute is debatable, just because, again, you just have to think of the number of women's cricketers out there right now. And I think as the base of players grows, then obviously we'll integrate more. But, a lot of international players have already contacted us to sign up going forward. So, I think it's definitely something that will definitely expand the number of games. It's whether we expand the number of franchises.
Actually, and speaking of teams, if I pivot to the men ever so quickly, Pete, I ask you this all the time. I'm gonna ask you again. On behalf of those in Grenada, for example, or even Dominica, I'm fairly certain what you're going to say. But has it ever crossed your mind to go more than 6 teams in CPL? I know logistically it might be an issue, but has it ever crossed your mind to have a 7th franchise?
Yeah. Definitely. And, we're currently reviewing and seeing whether that's a possibility. But that's the beauty of the 60 as well, because the 60 I can take anywhere. So, if we wanted to go and play 5 games in Dominica or Antigua or Grenada or wherever, you can do that. So, that becomes something that you can localize very easily. The franchises, putting another franchise in per se is not necessarily an issue. Other than to say, it just gobbles up a bit more time. You need more days to do it. And that's really where the challenge comes in, because, Cricket West Indies have have a pretty full schedule, as you would have seen from this year. So, you butt up against them, and then you've obviously got World Cups coming, every year now. So, yeah, it's challenging, but yeah, I think it's something we'll look at. I certainly wouldn't bet against us having another franchise in the next couple of years.
Interesting. And then, in terms of this tournament and I guess 2022, if you can, in a nutshell, what have been? Actually, I'm going to ask you a more difficult question first. What have been the things that you've taken away? We're like, I want to see that. I want to tweak that ever so slightly. Whether it be going into 2023 or 2024 or whatever it might be. We'll talk on the positives afterwards, of course. But what are the things you're like? I want to have a look at that again.
Logistics, I think that is the challenge. Just generally moving around the Caribbean, actually just the world at the minute is not an easy thing. But just moving everything and the way that we've done it, what I've noticed this year is that we've put a lot more pressure on the people that work the gig. I mean, it's been really long hours for people, just because of the tightness of the turnarounds and the window. So that's something that I have to look at to make sure that we don't sort of burn everyone out, because everyone loves the tournament. I mean, there's no question about that, and they love working on it. But you also want them to enjoy it, and I think there's been a lot of pressure logistically on what we've done. In terms of the tournament itself, the structure, I don't have a problem with it. I think all the teams, as I said, have all been very competitive. I mean, there's not been an issue from a cricketing side. I think DRS was a big plus this year. I mean, actually, it's funny. I was looking at the stats, and there's been a lot of decisions overturned. Which is good. That's what it's there for. And I think that's something that we've missed in the past. But no, generally, it's worked out pretty well. I do think there are certain things. Again, you come to a place like Guyana where people are used to sort of, especially some of the more seasoned international players, are used to certain conditions in terms of where they stay, how they, and I think Guyana is, whilst it's going through a huge transformation, that's a learning for all of us in terms of making sure that everything is in place to deal with that, which probably wasn't at the start of when we arrived a week ago.
Indeed. And then in terms of, I guess, the overwhelming positives, because it is important for you to stress them, and I think it's right for you to want to talk about why you're happy with what your brand has put on this year.
Yeah, look, I think if I take Guyana firstly, the support that the president down here has given to the games. He's built a huge cricket carnival around CPL. So, there's a real vibe and atmosphere here, which is just so exciting. And actually, if as a blueprint, if you took that to every other country where we played in, so you have the cricket, of course you've got the cricket, but around it, you've got all these other things that showcase, whether that's Jamaica, whether that's Barbados, whether that's Trinidad. So you have this, if you like, this week-long festival of activities. I think it works really well. I mean, it's extraordinary. You can't get into this country. I mean, I was looking to get someone in from Antigua. They can't fly in here until the 3rd of October. So, it's just bonkers. But it's that, because there's not just the cricket. There's all this other stuff going on. So, and I think that's the beauty of what CPL can deliver, and that's what I think the president here had the vision to look at, was to say, actually, we'll use CPL as the centerpiece for all this other activity, which will drive tourism, which will drive people coming home for the games. And that's really the economic opportunity that I think, CPL can offer the region, which is very exciting. But look, again, outside of that, I think, we started the program saying it, why would you not want to come and watch a game of cricket, whether you're in Trinidad, Guyana, or any of the other countries? It is just a great experience. And as I keep saying to people, it is, you come to the cricket, get a few rums inside you, there's nothing better. There really isn't. It's a great platform.
Speaking of rum, I saw that there was I don't know which night game it was, but I saw Danny Morrison advertising a CPL rum. So bring back a couple of cases for that through customs, please. On the way back.
and it's great when you talk to someone like Dan. Danny's been a mainstay of obviously CPL since day one, but he is such an advocate, and he's so passionate about it. And the reason is because it is so unique. It's not CPL in itself, I think, has done very well in the way that it's built the brand, but it's just the region, the fact that we're able to go to Guyana that is different to Trinidad, whether it's curry chicken or chicken curry, or any of these other great locations that we go to. You just have a very different vibe. The cultures are different, and that's what's so exciting. And I think that's what players buy into as well. That's why they love coming down here.
Santoki, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a chicken curry, just to end that debate. But no, definitely, Pete, thanks for coming on the show. And we're definitely envious of you getting to experience the finals live in Guyana. I'm sure it'll be something. Hopefully, Guyana can lift the maiden title after 10 years of attempts. But no, thank you very much for coming on and giving your insights into CPL.
Pleasure. And listen, it will. I think even if they don't get to the final, they've made a good run of it. But I think they've got that 12th man in the stand that's going to get them over the line.
Well, Santoki, you've heard it here first. This might be your year. This might actually be your year. But just to echo what Santoki said, Pete, thank you for giving up some of your time, certainly ahead of the game later tonight, Barbados Royals versus which might actually be the dress rehearsal, but Barbados Royals versus Guyana Amazon Warriors. And we look forward to catching up with you again in the future, Pete.
Thanks, lads. Appreciate it. Take care.
Much appreciated. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's been Pete Russell, CEO of the Caribbean Premier League. That's been a very quick whirlwind tour for episode 74 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. As ever, you know where to find us, at Carib Cricket once we come out of Twitter jail, at Carib Cricket on Twitter, Instagram. You can find us at Facebook. Basically, just search Caribbean Cricket Podcast.com and you'll find us everywhere you need to find us. As ever, that's been the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules seem coming. Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.